One of the questions we're often asked is which of the oral erectile drugs is going to be best for me? And it's a really good question. There's a few in Australia, in fact there's 4, and the thing to know is that they all work slightly differently and therefore one might be better than another in your particular instance. I'm Brad and I'm a pharmacist here at Men's Health Down Under in Canberra, and in this video I'm going to run through what the different drugs are and how they differ from one another. So in Australia we have 4 oral PDE5s, oral erectile drugs: Viagra, Cialis, Levitra and Spedra, and I'll try and use their generic names, the drug names, because that's generally how we refer to them. So sildenafil is Viagra, tadalafil is Cialis, vardenafil is Levitra, and avanafil is Spedra. So you can try and practice that at home. These are broken down into first generation and second generation. First generation being the first ones that came out. So the first one was Viagra, or sildenafil. Sildenafil takes about an hour to reach its optimal effect, and it must be taken on an empty stomach. If you take it with food, it doesn't work nearly as well. And certainly a fatty meal will delay its absorption and therefore delay its effect. So sildenafil, empty stomach, optimal effect is about an hour after you take it, so that's about the best time to be planning intimacy. And it's in the system for about 10 to 12 hours. What that means is if you take it Friday night at 10 o'clock, it's still going to be having a little bit of a residual effect the next morning. And certainly the blokes that we speak to give us that impression. So that's sildenafil. The next one that came out was tadalafil. The wonderful thing with tadalafil was that it lasted a lot longer than sildenafil. Tadalafil lasts in the system for a good 36 hours, which means that if you take it, same idea, take it Friday afternoon, Friday night, it's still going to be having some residual effect on the Sunday morning. So that's really quite impressive, and certainly from an intimacy perspective, it gives you the opportunity for a bit of spontaneity, which is quite nice. One of the drawbacks of tadalafil is that it takes a couple of hours to reach an optimal effect. So it's not as quick as Viagra to work. So what that means is it does take a little bit more planning if you're going to be using it in that sort of get the tap on the shoulder, it's time to take the pill and get going. So it does take a little longer to kick in. Doesn't matter about food, it can be taken with or without, which is great, so you don't have to plan that as much. And certainly we do find that is useful for some men. The next medication is vardenafil, which is the Levitra. Vardenafil, again, it came out in the early 2000s here in Australia, and it probably didn't get as much traction as had been hoped, because sildenafil and tadalafil were doing a pretty good job. What we find is that for some men, the vardenafil works really well where the others haven't worked particularly well. And it's just what drug works best for your body. So we do find it has a place in treatment here in Australia, despite the fact it's not prescribed as much. It's quite like sildenafil in that it takes about an hour to reach its optimal effect. Its absorption can be affected by food, not to the same extent as sildenafil, but it is still perhaps marginally better taken on an empty stomach. It's in your system for about 10 to 12 hours, so again, similar to Viagra, which is good. So again, you can have that taken later in the evening. It can have a bit of residual effect the next morning. The second generation one is, of which there's only one, so those other 3 were first generation. The second generation one we have available here in Australia is avanafil, or Spedra. It was made available in about 2013, however the proprietary product, the Spedra, hasn't been available in Australia terribly long, only a couple of years. The benefit of this medication is that it's really quick to kick in, about half an hour to reach peak effect, which is great, so it allows for intimacy pretty quickly. Its duration of action, like sildenafil and vardenafil, is about 10 to 12 hours, so again it can have some of that residual effect. Its absorption is not affected by food, so it can be taken with or soon after food, a fatty meal. It's not going to make it terribly much of a difference. So that's one of the benefits, I suppose, of the avanafil, one of the newer ones. So that's the 4 of them. In terms of side effects, they can all have some side effects. Sildenafil, or the Viagra, tends to have the most, and that can include a sniffly nose, blurred vision, reflux, muscle aches and pains, lightheadedness, and they're relatively common. Because the side effects wear off when the drug wears off, a lot of men put up with it, but there are other options that are less likely to have those effects. So again, you can talk to your doctor about which ones may have less side effects for you. Certainly the Avanafil has the fewest side effects. The reports of side effects are far less. We do get some reports of muscle aches and pains, but beyond that, it may be a bit of indigestion. It tends to be pretty well tolerated. So it might be something you could speak to your doctor about. The Vardenafil has a similar amount of side effects to Tadalafil, and that tends to be muscle aches and pains, indigestion, and a bit of a head congestion. So that's the quick overview of the different oral PDE5s available here in Australia that your doctor might be able to help you with. So if you have any questions, get in touch and certainly speak to your doctor about them.